Thank you, Brent. It's not often that a pastor will say to someone, hey, will you co-preach with me? Will you take the platform with me? And I think that speaks to his Christian maturity. A lot of pastors, no, this is my show. This is where I want to speak. But Brent has graciously said, Dane, would you like to talk today? And so I really appreciate that very much. One of the most beloved hymns within the church is a song called It Is Well With My Soul. And I know most of you are familiar with that song. Its lyrics and its memorable melody are just awe-inspiring. They really are, and they've inspired so many people over the years now. And as we examine the story behind that hymn, I think we have even more reason to cheer its inspiration. It's an incredible story. A man by the name of H.G. Spafford was an attorney, a businessman in Chicago in the late 1800s. A wealthy man. He had many real estate investments. But the year 1871, things began to go badly for him. His 4-year-old son died very suddenly of scarlet fever. And then in October of 1871, the Great Chicago Fire swept through the city. And in one single night, this man, Mr. Spafford, literally lost everything. All of his wealth were up in flames, I should say. He lost everything in a single night. 2 years later, he and his family are still trying to rebuild, still trying to make sense of life, to try to move on. And they decided to take a vacation, decided to go to England. Dwight Moody was preaching an evangelistic crusade in England at the time, and he wanted to go join the crusade and visit him. So he thought, well, we needed a vacation. So they bought tickets for him and his wife and their 4 daughters to sail across the Atlantic. But at the last minute, some scheduling interruptions came, and Mr. Spafford couldn't make the trip with his family, so he kissed them goodbye, put them on the ship, and he said, I'll catch up with you as soon as I get some things straightened here in the States, and we'll catch up in Europe. The family set sail, I think it was in November of 1873, across the Atlantic, but then tragedy struck. As they were getting near their port to anchor, they struck in a real weird naval accident, another ship in the sea. The ship that Mrs. Spafford was on sank within 12 minutes. She survived. Anne Spafford survived. She was taken to South Wales, where she sent a telegram across the Atlantic to her husband in the States, who was waiting for her. And it was a telegram consisting of 2 words. It said, saved, alone. Their 4 daughters perished in the sea. When Mr. Spafford got that message, he got on a boat himself, sailed across the Atlantic to join his wife. And the story is told that as he neared the place where his daughters had drowned in the water, that he took out pad and paper, or pad and pencil, and he wrote these very, very famous words. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever the lot, he has taught me to say, it is well with my soul. That's pretty amazing if you think about it. To be standing on the edge of a boat looking into the waters that had just swallowed your 4 daughters, after losing a son, after losing everything that he had, to be able to say, it is well with my soul. And one has to wonder, how do you get to a place where you can say, it's well? How do you get to a place where you've suffered this kind of tragedy, this kind of loss, and you can say, it's well with my soul? I think some might argue, well, he was a man of great faith. He had a lot of faith, and he probably did. But I don't think his great faith is what enabled him to write those words. I don't think it was his great faith enabled him to recognize the peace that he had, that it was well with his soul. I think it was because he had an understanding of the nature and the character of God. He knew God, and he knew who God was and what he was like. You see, I would wager to guess that there are some people even today who somehow see God as a little bit against them. That God really doesn't like you all that much. Or that God doesn't care. Maybe there's some people who believe that God just doesn't care what's going on. He's disinterested in my life. He's disinterested in my world. He just doesn't care about me. You see, you can have all the faith in the world, but if that's the kind of God you believe in, you will never say that it's well with my soul. The difference is knowing who God is. I believe that Mr. Spafford, as well as many others, recognize that he's a good God, that he's a kind God, that he's a God who loves mercy, and that he loves us. Now, I don't think you even need that much faith to find peace if that's your God. If you've come to recognize him as a good God, then I believe it's possible to reach a point where you can say, it's well with my soul. You know, just a few months ago, it's hard to believe, 2 months ago, we were celebrating Christmas. It seems like ages at this point. 2 months ago, we were celebrating Christmas, and Brent even used the word in his message, the incarnation. That's a kind of a fancy $5 theological word. The incarnation is when God became man. And think about that for a moment. This God who created us, who created the world and the planets and everything around us and life itself, then became one of us. Became one of us. And I believe that he became one of us because he wanted to experience your life. He wanted to know what it's like to be you. To know what it's like to walk in this world in skin and bones. To know what it's like to grow hungry, to grow tired, to sleep. To know what it's like to have good times like weddings and births and celebrations. And also to know and to walk through the times of betrayal and hurt and depth, because God wanted to know what it's like to be you. And beyond that, he went and died for us. See, that's a God who cares. That's not a God who's indifferent. That's not a God who doesn't care. That's a God who's intimately involved in our lives. He loves you, and he cares deeply for you, for all of us. And if that's the God that you worship, if that's the God you get to know, I believe you can understand peace. Now, I want to say that over the past few weeks especially, I know there have been many, many prayers offered. And I want to tell you that every prayer, regardless of whether it was uttered out loud in a worship service or whispered in your pillow at night, whether it was sung in the middle of a worship song or whether it was mingled with your tears, every single prayer has been heard by God. He's not turned his back on any of them. They didn't fall on deaf ears at any time. God heard every single prayer because he cares. He cares. He wouldn't have come to this world if he doesn't care. And he wouldn't have died if he didn't care. But he cares deeply. And so every prayer that we made, every prayer that was offered, I believe was heard by a kind, gentle, and merciful God. See, it doesn't take as much faith as you might think. It just takes knowing who God is. Who is he really? And if we can believe, if we can understand that he is a kind and a merciful God, and we can find peace. We can find it, and we can say, I believe. It is well with my soul. Thank you.